Hello guys, welcome to a new chapter of the Empress Dowager Cixi. This is gonna be chapter 14, The Summer Palace, 1886-1894. When her retirement was mooted in 1886, Cixi's dream of restoring part of the old summer palace, raised more than a quarter of a century earlier, came back to haunt her. The old splendor had only increased in allure as the years went by, and it was known in the court that her ultimate ambition was to restore it to some of its former glory. To finance her dream, she had been saving money from the royal household allowances. Eunuchs observed that she was extremely thrifty, and her ladies-in-waiting remembered her telling them to recycle gift wrappings and string. She decided that as the first step, she would restore a palace called King Ji Yuan, the Garden of Clear Ripples, a landscaped estate around the enormous Kuming Lake, which she loved. There the buildings were relatively few and less damaged, and could be repaired without increasing the already enormous costs. She knew the project was bound to arouse objection. More than a decade earlier, when her late son, Emperor Cixi, planned the project for her first retirement, the opposition had been so strong that she had felt compelled to call a halt. Now there would be the same chorus of disapproval, especially as there was already an official retirement home for her, the Sea Palace, adjacent to the Forbidden City. Even the renovation of that palace had brought criticism and was permanently short of funds. At some point, the private contractors, who employ thousands of workers, failed to pay wages on time, and the workers went on strike. The modern word strike thus entering court records for the first time in 1886-1887. Cixi was dissatisfied with the Sea Palace because it was in the middle of Beijing and would not give her the natural surroundings that she craved. Her heart was set on the old summer palace. She tried to justify the building work in an imperial decree in which she, unusually, added a personal plea, playing down the scale of the project as very limited repair work. She told the country that for a quarter of a century she had exhausted herself doing her duty day and night, fearfully as if standing over a precipice, worrying something might go wrong, and had brought some peace and stability to the empire. In all those years she had never gone on pleasure trips like hunting, which previous monarchs had enjoyed to the full, because she was mindful of the hard life of the people. She gave her assurance that the construction would not touch any funds from the Ministry of Revenue, so would not affect the livelihood of the people, and implored that all in the empire to show understanding. Indeed, while King Long the Magnificent had often made 2 or 3 long trips a year with his mother and consorts, each costing hundreds of thousands of taels, Cixi had never indulged herself in any such journeys, however much she longed to travel. She was a devout Buddhist and yearned to visit the sacred Buddhist mountain of Wutai to the southwest of Beijing, which had been her favorite destination for earlier emperors. But taking into account the cost of the journey, she had accepted the advice of Prince Gong and his fellow Grand Councillors and abandoned the idea. She told the grandees that in exchange for foregoing expensive excursions, such as visiting the hunting lodge like previous emperors, or going to the coast to inspect the newly modernized navy, which she could legitimately do, she would build her dreamed retirement home. There was no loud protest, and so began the building of Cixi's own new summer palace, the Ji He Yuan, the Gardens of Nurturing Harmony. Nowadays a major tourist attraction in Beijing, the Summer Palace has been the cause of much condemnation of Cixi. It has been claimed that its restoration cost tens of thousands of millions of taels, which Cixi stole from the navy, thus bankrupting it and leading to devastating defeat by Japan. Visitors to the Summer Palace are more than likely to hear this denunciation from the guides. The truth about the cost and her diversion of funds is rather different. The Summer Palace did not cost tens of millions. The original Garden of Clear Ripples, developed by Emperor Qianlong in the mid-18th century, had cost 4,402,852 taels. When Cixi rebuilt it, she added several buildings and modern comforts, so the expenditure certainly exceeded the sum. The initial costing by the project's accounting office covered 56 sites, about half of the total, and came to 3,166,700 taels. According to Chinese historians, who have been since studying the court records extensively, the total cost of the restoration is estimated at a maximum of 6 million taels. This is slightly more than what was spent on Emperor Guangxu's wedding, which was 5.5 million taels, an expenditure that came out of the Ministry of Revenue and gave rise to no complaints. Cixi put up 3 million from her savings from the royal household allowances, and some officials contributed donations, but still she needed some government funding. Although all state spending was authorized by the Empress Dowager, she could not simply take what she wanted. As she had promised in her decree that she would not use money from the Ministry of Revenue, Cixi devised a roundabout way of obtaining state funds. The navy was undergoing a process of modernization, headed by Prince Chun, and was allocated a colossal budget of 4 million taels a year. Could not a small slice of this sum, perhaps a portion of the interest derived from the money deposited in a foreign bank, be used to help build her summer palace? A slice that would not make no difference to the navy. This appears to be what she thought. She reckoned that the country need not know of her scheme if her devoted servant, Prince Chun, and the others involved covered up for her. Exactly how much she took is unclear. What is known is that in 1 year she was promised 300,000 taels, which seems to have been the usual annual amount. In just under a decade she may have siphoned off some 3 million taels, which tallies with the overall cost of the building works. This money did not come from the capital of the naval funds deposited in the bank, and leading Chinese scholars have concluded that the arrangement did not have a significant impact on the navy. While the impact was imperceptible, it was potentially corrosive. If she were to take the path of corruption, others would surely follow. Her stratagem was bound to be detrimental to the navy, which was her own baby. It seems that Cixi was troubled by what she was doing, to make her feel better as well as to mollify the population, who could see the building work and had begun to talk. The faithful Prince Chun suggested that, as Cixi was not going to the coast, the navy could train on Kunming Lake, so that she could review their exercises. In this case, buildings that could be legitimately repaired were repaired. Indeed, she watched some exercises, although they could hardly have been by gunboats, but she feared that heaven could easily detect the fraud. When the big fire broke out in the Forbidden City at the beginning of 1889, just before Emperor Guangxu's wedding and her retirement, she started to panic, thinking this might be heaven's wrath at her misdemeanor, and issued a decree halting the work. But soon, passion for her beloved summer palace conquered all other considerations, and Cixi cheated even heaven. Construction resumed. She oversaw the building work eagerly, going over the designs in detail, discussing them with the management and having progress reported to her every few days. 3/4 of the summer palace grounds comprise water, Kunming Lake, 2.2 square kilometers in size, which was overlooked by the Longevity Hill, 60 meters in height. Along the lake meandered a long covered wooden corridor with vividly colored pictures on its beams depicting Buddhist stories and folklore. Across the lake, visible in the distance, was an elongated stone bridge of 17 arches, elegantly flung over a narrow stretch of water. The whole palace estate was a perfect ensemble of seemingly undisturbed nature and richly artful creation. Electric lights were fitted with generators and lamps bought from Germany. Li, who supervised the purchase, wrote to Prince Qin for the Empress Dowager that the lamps were the latest models in the West and have not been seen in China. They are extraordinarily beautiful. The locals knew when she was in the palace. Over the landing pier was a tall lamppost with electric lights, which would be lit whenever she was in residence. When shown around, Grand Tutor Wang commented that he had never seen such splendid buildings and such luxurious decoration. It is generally considered to be the jewel of Beijing and a brilliant example of traditional Chinese landscape gardening.